Hey, good morning, everyone, and welcome back to your SideQuest Contact. We're continuing our discussion on running the game. This is part four, yep, or part three. Um, Part four, I think. We'll figure it out later. Anyway, so we've talked about making the adventure, right? That was the first thing we talked about. Had a whole series on it. And then we got into this series, running the game, and we talked about the beginning of that, the getting the players together, your scheduling, choosing your game, and choosing your delivery method, virtual tabletop, or at home, physical tabletop. So now that we've gotten all of that, you got your game, you got your players, you're ready to go, you've gotten set up, you've had a session zero, you've talked about backgrounds, you've built characters, and you have a really nice, good foundation from which to start your game. So let's get the game actually started. We're going to talk about a few points. Now, in my mind, and again, all this is just from my perspective. What works for me, what has made me successful at this, and when I say successful, do your players have a good time and do they want to come back? And for the most part, the answer to my games is yes. They have a good time and they want to come back. That is success in this hobby. And how you reach that, that's totally between you and your players, right? Because it's your game, it's their game, so you're doing it for your enjoyment. The tips and suggestions and things I'm talking about are what have contributed to my enjoyment and the enjoyment of my players. So in my mind, when I'm running the game, I got two modes in my mind. I got story mode and I got combat mode. And we're going to talk about both of these kind of in depth. But we're going to start with story mode because that's the more intriguing. That's what gets people into the game and into the story, and what motivates their characters to want to do the things they decide to do. So you're ready to go. You're on session one. So where are your players going to start? That's a big thing to think about because that's really going to decide the starting point, the directions that they can take from that point on. So starting point is something we want to think about. And how I like to go with starting point is I like to look at those initial allies, those initial ally contact NPCs, and try to find things that are similar to the players and see what fits the best. And it may not fit. They may be no similarities, and that's okay too. Got to figure out something, right? So let's talk about the adventure we worked on and the contact allies we came up with. I think remember we had a we had a bugbear ranger, right, Fringruza. So any players who are rangers, any players who are woodland based, any players who have a fey connection like bugbears do, that could be a good place to put your starting characters. Now, I want to back up a little because you want your players to start together, and that's just going to be the simplest thing, just to have them at the same point in the same setting, or the initial scene gets them together. You don't want to spend a lot of time with the players apart because now you got one player going in direction A, another player going in direction B, and then now they're all kind of all over the place. You want to get them together in a relatively quick manner. So Bugbear Ranger, what was the other one? We had the Hadozi Warlock. So any jungle or woodland, again, woodland-based characters, warlocks, Hadozis, anything that would live out in the wilderness, we could start the party here. And who else did we have? We had the the Gif Sorcerer. Now let's say there's only one player that kind of fits any of these, right? Go ahead and go with that. Take that one player and the rest of the party, put them in that scenario, in that setting, and that's their starting point. If there's no logical links between the allies and the ally contacts and the player characters, then it could be wherever you want, wherever it helps you get the story going the best. But try to make it make sense as far as what fits with your player characters, their racial makeup, their class makeup, their background makeup, and see if you can find a place to put them that fits that. So you got them started, right? They're in their initial scene, their initial scenario. Now, another thing I want to talk about is player agency and free will. I think from my experience and the way my mind boils it down, there's two schools of thought here. There's the sandbox and the railroad, right? The railroad is like the players are going in one direction. They have no option to move in another direction, and they're kind of stuck on that train. And the sandbox is the open world where the players can choose to go to any location at any time to do anything. And I've found it's best to have a blend. Too, too open of a world, too open of a scenario from my experience. Like you say to the players, you can do whatever you want. What do you want to do? One of the first things they ask you back is what's going on, right? What's going on in the world? What's going on in the city? So they need something for which to kind of wrap around and make a decision. What do we want to do? Well, it's based off of what's going on, which is based off of what you create or you put together. Now, there's this kind of like inside joke between players and DMs about like, oh well, the DM wants us to do this, so we should go do that. And I really don't like that, right? I don't want the players to think that they have to do what I want them to do. Now, realistically speaking, running the game, I do want them to do what I want to do, right? But I want them to figure those paths out on their own. I want them to discover, okay, hey, if we go to location A, we can pick up item B, and that will help us against villain C, so we should go do that. And that way, all the stuff you lined up for that situation is there. You can implement it and you can put it together and you can run them through it. Now, there's also, this also goes with, I'm going to take being adaptable and I'm going to move it up here. Kind of like a sub point, agency and free will. You got to be adaptable, right? So let's take a very basic example. Players are walking down a dungeon. The door to the chamber to the right, you have a super cool setup, right? A really cool monster, some traps, some riddles, something there that is going to be really fun to run through, right? For you and the players to the chamber on the right. And then once the players get to that intersection, they choose to go to the left. And they never make it to the chamber on the right. Well, that you don't have to have that encounter like tethered to that location. Move that encounter, put it somewhere else. And as far as like dungeon crawling goes, I'm not a big fan of it. I enjoy it to an extent, but too much repetitive. Walk down the hall, go to a room, kill the monster, take its stuff, go to the next room, kill the monster, take its stuff. That I like more story, like surface related stories where you're dealing with other characters, right? So when I'm running a dungeon crawl, essentially, it's not a long one, right? It has a purpose, it has a point, and you're making your way through it to get to a goal. So I kind of just, I don't really fill in the dungeon. Like I'll have a map, and here, I'll show you an example. Let me go here. Let me go to my world here. Here it is, Bandit Hideout. So I create this map, right? We got some points of entry, right? We got, depending on how they get in, the south entrance, the east entrance, and I think there's a north entrance, right? And I don't fill this in, right? I just let the players go in. I know what's in here, so I decide where and when the things attack, right? I don't have to name each room. I don't have to list out the things in each room and hope the players walk through there. I just know what's going to happen. And when they walk through this room, what's the first thing in my mind that's going to happen? They're going to get ambushed. Okay, so no matter where they are in this map, I can come up with a quick ambush. And then let's say, let's say the final monster of this map, I don't have to have it in a set location. Once they've gone through the initial encounters, then I can just put that final monster wherever they are and say, okay, yeah, you found the main secret layer. Okay, here's where the final monster is. And you go into battle. In that way, the players are making their decisions. I'm going to go to the left. We want to go to the right. We want to go forward. We want to go explore this. So they're making their own decisions, and you're filling in as they're going along. You don't have to fill out the whole map in room A, room B, room C. Just kind of have a list and know a list of a sequence of events, know what's going to happen, and just make that happen wherever they happen to be. That way they have their free will, they have their agency, they're making their own decisions, but the things you want to happen are still happening. So be adaptable. Move around monsters, encounters, as the players make decisions. So that was kind of a base example of like walking through a dungeon. But what about like up on the surface where you're dealing with other non-player characters and their schemes, goals, wants, and desires? Well, that gives you a little more room to kind of implement your vision on what's going to be happening. No matter what room, what building, or what spot in a city that the players go to, let's go back. Just kind of get more visual. We're going to talk about visual here in a moment. No matter what area they decide to go to in the city, I can put an encounter and say it's going to happen here. I don't have to, again, like think of the dungeon example. I don't have to label A, B, C, D, come up with a list. What's in area A? What's in area B? I just have a list of what's here and the things I want to implement while the players are moving about and exploring the city. And those things, those events can happen at any point and any time that I decide. And it's those events, those things that happen that the players latch onto to make their decisions. Very rarely have I started kind of an open game where I said, okay, what do you all want to do? Where they just said, we want to do XYZ. They always ask me back, what's going on? And then they make their decision around that. So let's talk about that. Next thing, descriptions, maps, handouts. Now, description is important. You want to be able to get your characters immersed in your setting, in your scenario. But you don't want to go overboard either. There's a fine balance, right? Because you don't want to, like, if you're going into an elaborate description of something and you see a player like roll their eyes or sigh or kind of fidget, that might be a sign that you're going too much into the descriptive detail. Give them enough so that at least you can kind of see it in your mind's eye, and then so once you're able to see it in your mind's eye, then we can kind of think that they're kind of maybe seeing the same thing. So descriptions are good. Now, a lot of adventures, pre-published adventures, have little description blocks. So as they move into a region, if they move into a room, there's a little box that kind of says, "Hey, you can read this," and it kind of describes what the players are seeing. But even in some of those block texts, those descriptive texts, sometimes I think there's too much. I don't need to go. The player. It's not really relevant how many scratches the marble pillar has. Or it just there are some descriptive details that aren't that important. Some are, but you don't want to focus on the ones that are important because that means the players are going to hone in on those. Okay, he only like the dungeon master only describes stuff that's important, so that means that's part of the plot. That's part of the story. So have enough description so that that way they're not focusing on your description as okay, that's the that's the secret room or whatnot, and don't go overboard and bore them with description. Maps are good with that because if you have a printed map, you want your players to have some kind of visual reference. Other handouts, maps included, things they find in game. If they find like a hidden tome, you might want to have a printout of that so they can take that. Now, in my virtual world, images, descriptions, they're pretty simple. I don't really have to go into a lot of descriptive detail. I can just pull up an image. I can hit show players, and on their screen they see this disgusting patched monster, this gross rotted thing. I don't have to go into a lot of detail. Maybe I can mention how bad it smells. It smells like death, smells like refuse. But they can clearly see how disgusting it is. And like anything else like that. For if they find books or scrolls and stuff, I can just copy that right into this chat here. They can copy it into their notes if they want. So that's what I used with when we were running Curse of Strahd. When they found certain letters, when they found the Tome of Strahd, when they found things like that, I'll just copy paste them out of the book into the chat so they could all see it. And this is another reason why I'm kind of leaning on the virtual tabletop because it really does a lot of work for me. Now, another part of story mode is investigating. Players like to try to figure things out. They like to have a mystery in front of them. They like to have something where they can go seek answers and seek clues and seek answers. So that's kind of another big part of my story mode. And what I like to do is I like to come up with, for almost the main NPCs at least, I like to come up with discovery points. Like a little list of short descriptions, kind of as I'm doing it here, that players can discover while investigating. Maybe three or four different things that the players can discover based off how they roll. If you're going to make them roll for discovering things, some DMs just say if you're putting forth the effort, these are the things you're going to find. I like to make rolls. A lot of times I'll have them choose a skill to roll. They can choose investigation, insight, perception. They can choose one of those skills as they're looking for clues or investigating someone. Now, with that though, you got to be ready for the crit 20. Someone's making an investigation, they make a roll, they hit a crit 20. That's okay. I actually like that because that saves a little time, right? I can just say, okay, you lucked out. You found a bunch of stuff about the subject you're looking into. Let me just copy paste what everything I have on this right into there. And that's not really an info dump because I got, just some bullet points, right? I'm not like writing a novel. I'm just writing some bullet points on what the players can find as they're doing their searching and their investigating. And you also got to be prepared for poor rolls, right? Because they don't if you're rolling and they roll poorly, they may not find the things you kind of need them to find. So you may need to introduce those discovery points in another way. If they're investigating, for example, let's just say everyone rolls crappy, fives, eights, tens, nines, and they really don't find much of anything. You can still take those discovery points and deliver them through an NPC. Like an NPC they're talking to can say, "Oh, hey, did you hear about so and so?" Or did you hear about this? And then that way you can still deliver those discovery points because the players do need those to figure out what's going on and to push forward in the adventure. They need to figure those things out, but you don't want to make it like just easy. You want them to work for it, and then when they find these things out, like it was the Monday night game. There was a one of those great aha moments. Like the player says, "Wait a minute, this is what's going on." And then like the light bulb went shined, and they're like, oh yeah. And for me, that was a very fulfilling moment. They caught it, they got the secret, they got the thing, and now they were going to move on it and take action about it. So that's kind of my takes on story mode. Getting the players engaged with the story, being adaptable, having a good starting point. Where are they going to start the story? If they choose to go left instead of right, what do you do? How do you adapt around that? Be prepared for descriptions, maps, handouts, anything the players need and discovery points, things the players need to make their decisions to advance the story. And this setup for me has worked well, because the players are, you know they feel like they're in charge, right? They're making the decisions, they're the ones moving about in the story, and for the most part they are right, they are in charge, right? Because if we didn't have players, DMs wouldn't have games to run. So you need players, and they need to have a good time. All right, so I think that's a good cutoff point for today. Went over some good points for story mode. Next episode, probably tomorrow, will be combat mode. Once the story hits a spot where now we're fighting, either to accomplish a goal or to survive, how do we make that smooth? That's my goal: is smooth combat, and we'll talk more about that next time. All right, my friends. Well, I appreciate once again hanging out with me. Appreciate your time. Thank you, and hope you have a great weekend. I'll see you next time.